Hello, this is Dan Humberg, and I'm making this video as a aid to a patch or a short-term fix for a change in the tin kit for a case 8250 combine. In this case, in the model 21 year, they changed a little bit of the exhaust system, and we need to change the tin here to accommodate it. I will eventually modify the kit so that you won't need this part of the video, but if you already have the kit and you need to modify it to fit in the spot where it doesn't fit, this will help do that. What you're looking at is the CAD model, or the computer aided design model of the tin. Most of the tin anyway. I've taken off the top piece, the big top deck up here that kind of covers everything over, so that we can look inside of it. I'm looking down in here right now. This is actually the fixed or the modified version. I'll show you this, and then I'll click and show you the original, what you probably have as tin to begin with here. Just a minute. Okay, we're back. This is the version that was sent out this year, because I didn't know that they were going to make that change on the exhaust system. On the exhaust system on the 8250, there is a choke right after the turbo. The turbo goes right inside here, and right after it, as the exhaust comes out, it goes through a kind of a cast iron choke, and underneath that is an actuator, a hydraulic actuator, to control the position of that choke. And on the previous years, there was a space in between the choke and the actuator where we could slip this bottom piece of the tin, the piece that's highlighted there, slide it around between the supports between those two components, and slide it in place in order to connect it to the tin in the back. This year they put looks like a heat shield crimped around that choke fitting in here, and that closes the space between those two components so that you can't slide this piece of tin in there anymore. It just won't go. There's no gap for it to slide under. And so we're going to cut a piece of this out so that we can fit up against it on the one side, and then we'll patch a little piece on the other side to tighten it up around there. So I'm going to click back to the other assembly. First of all, let's look at this one once. If we look at this part in here, and I'll zoom in on it a little bit, this piece here has kind of fingers. It's got this finger and then this big chunk over here, and it slides in underneath that exhaust piece. What we're going to do is cut right down this line, cut down here and over here across to this line, so that we take out this chunk in the center. And we'll also take out just about 1/8 of an inch along here. And you might have to make that cut all the way to the end. It wouldn't hurt if you made it all the way to the end. My illustration doesn't show that, but you could cut it all the way to the end so that it can slide to the left of the underneath here, but to the left of the piece that it'll have to fit around. So we can cut this chunk out right here, and you want to cut it out if possible without reducing its size any more than necessary, because we're going to use that piece as a part of the next patch. But I'll send out a couple of PDF files so that you can see where the cuts should be made. But essentially, we're extending this line where the cursor is running here, down here, coming straight across to intersect the bottom of this opening, and then we'll go just beyond that and take maybe 1/8 of an inch off this edge up here. So that'll take this chunk out. Now let's go back to the other one and see what it looks like with the new piece put in, or with that chunk missing, and then I'll show you where to put in this piece that we'll make out of the scrap. Okay, now we're looking down inside here again. Haven't changed anything else here. I mean, the only thing we've changed is to cut out that piece. And like I said before, we cut straight down off that existing line, come down to this corner down here, which is straight across. Let's see if I can line this up any better for you. It's hard for me to make it horizontal. There, I guess I could do that, push a button and do it that way. So there will be a cut here across the bottom, and we can extend that over here and then cut up to this edge, take out that chunk in the middle. One thing you'll notice here is there's this dark blue. That's this piece over here. It has a flange that extends underneath here. And you may need to trim that one as well because it may want to bump into this heat shield here. You don't need to. If it'll fit, that's fine. You can slide it in there to see if it fits when you're doing the assembly on the combine. If it fits, great. If it doesn't, you probably have to trim a little bit off of that one on this side of that flange too. Just cut it with a tin snips. Probably in this case you could take a quarter of an inch off and it wouldn't hurt in there. But on the when you assemble this on the bench, these two would overlap each other. So you cut that out, and I've also cut out a little notch here. There is a bolt on the actuator box underneath the exhaust thing, and I think that this plate, this piece here, may want to bump into that bolt. And if that's the case, then you can cut a notch out of there to fit around that bolt head. The head is at an angle, and it's kind of an odd little place, but if this piece wants to bump into that, you can cut just enough out of this thing so that it'll fit up tight against the heat shield jacket or just underneath that, so clear that bolt. That's what that notch is for anyway. Now this piece up here, you won't have that piece. This is something that I'll have cut for the next version of this, or maybe do this whole thing differently, but I could make this piece to fit in there right now if I have to send one out in a hurry. So this is what I would do because I already have screw holes here and here in the existing stuff. So I would design a new piece to use those same screw holes. And it has a notch in here because there's the arm of the actuator that controls that choke has to come up through here. And to put this one in place, you'd fit it sideways through here and then flop it down over the flat bottom here and put the screws through this kind of as a last step in there. Once this rest of this piece is in place, leave those two holes available to do that. Now you may not be able to use those holes because you don't have a large chunk of tin to work with. You're going to have the piece of scrap that you cut out of this other space. And so I've sent you one of the PDF files shows a modified version of kind of this thing. It's smaller. It only overlaps here about 3/8 of an inch and maybe 3/8 of an inch over here. And it's not exactly the same piece, but it could be fit on here and has the same little neck here to fit behind that actuator arm. And it should fit close up against the heat shield from the back side here. And if you have to trim it, you can trim it, but it should. Let's flip around the back of this. We can zoom in on looking up from the bottom, and here's that. This is that piece. I can highlight it even though it's now on the top and we're looking up from the bottom. That's that piece there, and it lines up with these other edges here of this piece that's part of the drops down and back. Anyway, you can line that up with there to know where it goes on the bench and put it in place. Now I'm going to flip this back over. Here we are again, looking down from the top into the box, and I've got that piece in place in there. Yours will, again, like I said, it'll only overlap here maybe 3/8 of an inch, and similarly on this side, and it'll probably be cut off here somehow too, so that it doesn't it's not this wide here, because you just won't have that much material to work with. But you could put a screw or two over here. You'll have to probably punch holes or drill holes for the screws while you're assembling it on the bench. But like I showed you on the back, you can line this up with those other pieces to know where it goes, and then drill or punch a hole here and maybe another one right here, right close to the edge. And then you have to drill or punch a smaller hole through the background pieces so that you can put a screw through there. But I would assemble that on the bench to know that I could put it together on the piece. It'd be nice to have a screw over on this side, and if you can put one there, that's great. If you can't, it's probably not going to come apart even with just a couple screws on this side, and the air is moving left to right across this, so it's not going to do anything to this inside there. But ideally, we would have a screw or two on each side to hold it in place. This hole in the middle is going to be taken up by that actuator box, or the heat shield at the bottom of that actuator box, and that little actuator arm will poke up through here. Once you do have this assembled on the combine, be sure to test the range of motion of that actuator arm. Push it up on the, reach under and push it up on the, from the bottom so it swings through its arc and pushes that arm up through here to make sure that it clears on all sides, because you don't want to have this rubbing on that. You don't want it to impede the motion of that thing. It probably has more enough power to do that, but you just want a little bit of clearance around that arm as it swings up through that space. Okay, let's see, what else do we have to talk about? Anything else here? Like I said, I'm going to look up at the from the bottom one more time. If I rotate it around to the bottom, notice there's a cut in this blue piece, and you'll have that cut in the one that you have. It's piece number 10, I believe. And you could either extend that cut a little bit farther back in here and then cut it all the way off this end if you need to. You may need to do that to fit it in there. Otherwise, it might fit as it is. I just don't know, because we're talking about maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. And it's very difficult to get on the machine and measure it to know exactly out here where that piece is going to land. But if you need to, you can trim that piece out a little bit and test fit that one and get it on there. And then these other pieces will fit around that actuator box. Here's that hole again where that actuator thing swings up through. Okay, the rest of this should fit the same way as it's intended. That looks like the only thing that they changed on the system, but to put that heat shield around there. I've also been told on a 9250 that they moved one of the sensors that's in the exhaust system over here, so it comes out of a different spot, and the folks doing that one are going to have to cut a new hole for that sensor to come through, or sensor wire or cable to come through. Anytime you do that, you want to make sure that you don't have sharp edges touching that a wire or cable coming through there. And I use some of that aluminum foil tape that I package with the kit to make sure that those wires or those cables are isolated, but you don't, and you can make enough of a hole around so that they're not going to make contact with the enclosure, but then you can kind of fill up that hole with some strips of that aluminum foil tape. It's pretty good for that. And similarly here, you could use that tape if we ended up with a gap around that box down here. If the gap is 1/4 of an inch or more, then I'd use a strip of that tape, probably either from reaching down from the inside or up from the bottom, to tighten it up against that. So what we don't want to do is dump a whole lot of air out of one spot here. We want that air to be forced to spread out through the whole box and kind of filter out lots of small holes rather than 1 or 2 big ones. That way it goes to all spots inside the enclosure. Okay, so this is the patch, or my explanation of the patch, for a case 8250 model year 21. And so if you have any questions about it, you can call me. I think my cell number is on the website, harvestfires.com. And so you can call me there if you really end up in a jam putting this on there and have a question about how to do that. But I will try to, in the case of these first few kits that are using this, where we didn't know that this was going to be the case, I will also send out a couple of PDF files that show the old floor plate down here, the one that we're going to or the modified version of it, and a version of this piece up here made out of the scrap tin that you can cut to the dimensions shown there and fit in place and screw on if you can find, if you can get a couple holes here made to put screws through. So good luck with the installation. I know that it's a challenge to put this on, especially the first time. After you've done one or two, it isn't a lot more fun, but it goes a little bit faster, and you have a few less challenges with putting it on. So good luck with the installation.